So I know we're a bit running late, but it's not only our fault because we started very late. So we'll do this session discussion panel together with you, if possible, but obviously we'll make it a bit shorter because everybody's hungry. I just remind you that I think we'll catch up with the planning starting at 2 with the keynote of Hunter Hoffman that I will also have the honor of introducing. So thank you, Sri, for being here today. Thank you for the invitation. There is a microphone which is gonna run into the audience. I'll give you mine then. So she will get a microphone, and while you're thinking of it, raise your hand. She will come to ask you, to leave it to you for asking your question. But meanwhile, I will have the first question to open the round. So I will start with the first question, which is the one I often have as your researcher, which is when speaking about neuroscience, people ask me if it's a danger for the brain. Is a risk of manipulating people with virtual reality? What am I doing? Am I changing the brain of people with doing that? So I will of course ask your opinion on that, and Mel, you will have the honor of starting.
Thank you. I don't think virtual reality is any more dangerous to the brain than life is. The point of virtual reality is we have experience, and every experience, I mean, the neuroscientists will tell you better than me, but every experience we have, of course, changes the brain. You read a book. I mean, I've read very, very powerful books that have had effects on me for weeks and weeks. Nobody's yet said, oh, books are dangerous. Well, actually, they do sometimes, especially in certain countries at the moment. But, yeah.
Mavi?
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, of course, we go to school to have our brains changed. So, I mean, changing the brain is not bad. There is efforts to use, I mean, virtual reality is being used to do neurorehabilitation. We hear Andrea talking about this today, and the idea of this is that the brain is going to change. So, many of the applications that are done for virtual reality, like training applications or neurorehabilitation or treating phobias, they are all done with the idea that it's going to change the brain for the good. So, of course, there may be sides that even are unthinkable, I mean, of course, there can be a negative side, and I think what we have to make sure is that there is enough research on some of these. For example, I don't think it's well known how the brains of children can be affected by the systems that are being sold at the moment, or that are going to be sold. So I think there is a lot of research that needs to be done to make sure that the most vulnerable brains, or the brains that are being developed, like young kids, it's important to study the effects there. So I think this must be an effort to do research on these areas, because these brains are more vulnerable.
Well, I don't think I have anything to add to that. I agree with you. I think perhaps just to finish with a bit of irony, I think that the fear of virtual reality or whatever is an alibi for people not to cope with reality is actually much tougher, much dangerous, much more manipulative, and we all find scapegoats, and I think virtual reality may be one of those mediated scapegoats.
Thank you. We had someone with a question already there, so please, can you stand and ask your question?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm Fabian. I'm a web developer. My question is, what I understood from your studies that our self model is quite flexible. We can extend it. We can update it, let's say. And I'm wondering if there is a kind of training effect, like the more we extend or update it through experiments or through experiences, the more flexible it becomes, or not, or has it been studied?
Who wants to answer? Mel? Mavi? David?
Well, you want to?
Well, I just was going to say that there is not so much experience on very repetitive use of virtual reality in general, and also in the experimental side. So this is something, also an area that requires more research. So it's a very interesting question, to what extent in particular, in the body transformation illusions that we can do with a rubber arm, my experience is that if you have experience, it is easy to do it again. It's easy to get into being more receptive, maybe, to get this. But it's one of the areas that I think we need more research on repetitive use of virtual reality.
The next question.
Hi, my name is Hannah. I'm a developer. And I had a question. There's a lot of what was being said was about an extension of self in virtual reality and then having a sense of self within another body. And I was wondering, oftentimes virtual reality is referred to as an empathy machine. So we're a bit better able to understand the perspectives of other people basically through an experience in virtual reality. So I was wondering if you thought that perhaps this is a further extension of self, or if it's just something entirely different, as you're seeing others as part of yourself more as you experience time with them.
Maybe David,
I think the term empathy is very, in particular those days in age, in particular in the scientific literature, is a huge confusion. Nobody agrees on what we mean. Yes, sure, taking the perspective of others is very key in empathy. It's a long-term developmental mechanism, and it seems that human beings have naturally a hard time with that. It's very hard to listen to others, right? It's very hard to take perspective. So yeah, maybe as Mel and they have done great work that suggests that you can do stuff like that with perspective taking. Some other people do that with videos. Like I worked for very long in neurology, and in neurology we were doing things like that to help patients to kind of become aware of their own predicament and attitude just by showing them the videos of themselves. Now, I don't know if technology is the solution to that. It helps a bit, but maybe actually it's a placebo effect at the end. I don't know. It's a question to you guys.
Yeah, in our work so far, I've not used the word empathy at all. For example, in the racial bias work, I don't think it really operates through empathy. What we're looking at is implicit racial bias, and implicit racial bias is not your explicit attitudes, it's how you actually behave in a situation. So, for example, unconscious behaviour, you go on a bus and who do you choose to sit next to? So you can be completely non-biased in your attitudes, but your behaviour. And I think that implicit bias comes from basically being bombarded by information from society, that society makes these associations all the time between in-groups and out-groups. So I think another way of explaining it, of course there is perspective taking that doesn't necessarily involve empathy, but it's you're getting extra information. So it's like as if the brain says, I'm an okay person, I'm okay. Now I'm a different person, black. There are all these associations that are negative with black. This is completely unconscious. But what happens is that the associations of myself disrupt the associations, the negative associations there are with the out-group. And so that in our test, what we do is we're basically sampling the fast associations that people make between categories of people and their attributes. And I think, provided you have reasonably high self-esteem, what happens is when you're embodied as the out-group, it disrupts those associations. And there's some evidence for this because we find that this method doesn't really work for people who have low self-esteem. So if you have higher self-esteem, it's more likely that you get these reductions in implicit bias. So empathy is a possibility, but so far we've not employed that as an argument in our work. Yeah.
Okay, can we switch to someone else? I mean, you're welcome to come discuss. There was a question. Maybe one last after.
So my name is David Wood from Humanity Plus and London Futurists. So I want to ask about altered states of consciousness, in particular about experiments which allowed people to have a sense of being outside of their body, not in the body but somehow floating in the room. Mystics and society throughout the ages has got tales of people who apparently can imagine themselves leaving their body, usually after some hallucinogenic drugs or magic mushrooms or what's similar. Do you think that the experiments with virtual reality might make this something that more people can do, that will have this ability without being in a VR setup? And would you encourage it? Do you think this is a good set of experiences to explore further?
I think actually we should go back to psychedelic research and combine psilocybin and LSD with virtual reality in a well-controlled manner. But because pharmacology actually can give us a lot of interesting context. I'm saying that like a bit provocatively, but I think it's important. In my model, for instance, it's not about my model, but it's just that this geometry, if my theory is true, in fact, you can take point of views that are here on the moon, but you can also take point of view at infinity. And when you put yourself at infinity in this geometry, you have like the point of view of a god. And you start experiencing the world as funnels, honeycombs, as things that really looks like mandalas, a lot of the things that mystics experience. And when they lose, when you meditate or when you are under drug, you are not as much constrained by sensory evidence. It's not like, you kind of free-floating like in dream. And this geometry can bring you into states that basically generate most of the things that has been described by mystics. And by the way, there was like Stirner, what was his name? The 19th century, early 20th century mystics.
And Uspensky.
Yeah, so those two guys, they can tell you the name, I forgot, actually believed that projective geometry was a connection to God.
We don't. But
we don't. Or maybe, who knows?
So we've done actually 2 experiments on out of the body where actually Mavi showed one towards the end where you're embodied in a body with both visual motor, the body moves like you, and visual tactile stimulation. So people got a very strong sense of being in that body. And then we move your perspective up and above so that you see the body you were previously in outside. And what we were looking at is fear of death. And what we found is that there were 2 different conditions. Let's say the one that was a more true out-of-the-body experience where you really felt yourself to be up there, it seemed to reduce people's fear of death. Then we have another one that's not yet, but it's to do with simulating a whole near-death experience. And we found that, like in near-death experiences, people's life attitude becomes a bit more positive afterwards. So the question of whether this will make people seek out these experiences without virtual reality, I don't know, but I don't think I don't think there's anything negative about that. Actually, as you say, it comes from traditions of Buddhism and yoga. Usually you have to sit for 20 years alone on a mountain to get these experiences. If you can somehow, if you're interested to get those experiences through more electronic means, then I think that's okay.
So I think we will end the session now. I know there's a lot of questions. You're very welcome to us, and we'll be gladly answering and discussing with you. But it's already 1:15. The next session will start at 2. We are more than half hour late, so I think it's good. And thank you everybody. A last round of applause for our speakers, please. Thank you, and see you later.